The first time I really noticed Malik, really saw him, was on a hot July afternoon. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement, the sun pressing down like a weight on my skin. I had been sitting on my back porch, sipping iced tea, my mind lost in the usual humdrum of daily life, laundry, dinner plans, my husband's latest work trip. And then I saw him. Across the fence, Malik stood in his driveway, hood propped open on his car, his dark skin gleaming with sweat. His muscles flexed as he wiped his forehead, a smear of grease on his bicep. He was shirtless, wearing only loose basketball shorts that hung low on his hips. I swallowed hard. I shouldn't have been staring. I was a married woman, a wife, but I was staring. Malik had moved in 6 months ago, renting the house 2 doors down. I knew very little about him except that he was a mechanic, worked odd hours, and had a deep, easy laugh that carried through the neighborhood. He was polite, reserved, but when he smiled, God help me, it was the kind of smile that made your stomach tighten in places you forgot existed. I told myself I was just people watching, like anyone else would, but when Malik glanced up, catching me mid-stare, something in his gaze held me captive. He didn't smirk. He didn't frown. He just looked, deep and unblinking, like he knew every thought running through my head. I felt my face heat. I jerked my eyes away, heart pounding, and busied myself with my phone. But my fingers were trembling, my breath shallow. What the hell was wrong with me? The days passed, but that look stayed with me. A spark had been lit, one I couldn't seem to put out. Every time I stepped outside, my eyes drifted toward his house. And every time, I caught Malik watching me too. One evening, just as the sun dipped low, I decided to go for a jog. I needed to clear my head, shake off this ridiculous tension. I slipped into my tight leggings and a sports bra. Nothing out of the ordinary, just my usual workout clothes. Or at least, that's what I told myself. As I ran past Malik's house, he was outside, leaning against his car, a bottle of water in hand. "Didn't know you jogged," he said, his voice rich, smooth. I slowed to a stop, pretending I needed to catch my breath. "Yeah, every now and then." He eyed me, his gaze slow, deliberate. Good for the heart. Was it my imagination? Or had his eyes lingered on my chest? A thrill ran down my spine. "Good for the soul, too," I replied, forcing a light laugh. Malik smiled, taking a slow sip of water, his Adam's apple bobbing. "You should be careful running alone." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't a warning. It was something else. "I can handle myself," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. His eyes locked onto mine, something unreadable passing through them. "I bet you can." The air between us grew thick, heavy. I should have ended the conversation. I should have kept jogging. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, heart racing, as the night swallowed us whole. If you're loving this story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more passionate, dramatic tales. You won't want to miss what happens next. That night, lying next to David, I couldn't stop thinking about Malik. I felt dirty, wrong, but also alive. David barely stirred beside me, his breathing even, deep in sleep. He had been distant lately, more focused on work than on us. Our conversations were predictable, our nights routine. There was no passion anymore, no spark. Malik, on the other hand, I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to think about something, anything else. But even in the darkness, I could feel the heat of Malik's gaze on my skin. The next afternoon it happened again. I was in my backyard, watering the plants, when I felt it, that sensation of being watched. I turned and there he was, leaning on his fence, arms folded, that same unreadable expression on his face. "Hot day," he murmured. I nodded, throat dry. "Yeah." Silence stretched between us, thick with something unspoken. Then, before I could stop myself, I asked, "Do you like living here?" He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering his answer. "It has its perks." His eyes dragged slowly over me, his meaning clear. My pulse quickened. "Jessica!" David's voice snapped through the air. I turned sharply, my heart leaping to my throat. My husband stood at the back door, holding his laptop, looking impatient. "Can you help me with something?" I nodded quickly, my body stiff, my face burning. "Yeah, coming." I turned back to Malik, But he was already walking away, that lazy, confident stride making my stomach flip. That night, I barely spoke to David at dinner. My mind was elsewhere. On Malik, on the way his eyes followed me, on the way he made me feel like a woman again. Desired, seen. And it terrified me, because I knew this wasn't just harmless flirting anymore. This was the beginning of something dangerous. Something I wouldn't be able to stop. I told myself it wouldn't happen. For days, I kept my distance. I stayed inside, focused on housework, threw myself into anything that would keep my mind off Malik. But he was always there, in my thoughts, in my body's cravings, in the way my skin tingled at the memory of his gaze. And then David left. It wasn't unusual. His job required travel, and this time, it was a 3-day trip to Chicago. He kissed me goodbye that morning, barely looking up from his phone, muttering something about checking in later. I watched him pull out of the driveway, his car disappearing down the street, and then, I was alone. Alone with my thoughts. Alone with temptation. I spent the morning convincing myself I wouldn't do anything reckless. I worked out, cleaned the house, even called a friend for coffee, but when she canceled last minute, I was left with nothing but time. And Malik was still next door. The knock at the door came just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart leapt into my throat, and when I pulled open the door, there he was. Malik, standing on my porch in a white tank top, sweat glistening on his skin. "Hey," he said, his voice smooth, easy. "Got any sugar?" I stared at him. I knew damn well he didn't need sugar. He was playing a game, and the worst part, I wanted to play too. "Yeah," I said, stepping back, letting him in. He moved past me, his scent, clean sweat, motor oil, something undeniably masculine, filling my lungs. I swallowed hard, shutting the door behind him. I led him to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I grabbed the sugar jar from the counter. "Here you go." Malik didn't take it right away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching me. "You been avoiding me?" I let out a nervous laugh. "No, just been busy." He raised an eyebrow. "That right?" I nodded, gripping the jar tighter. "Yep." A long silence stretched between us. His eyes never left mine, and I felt the weight of his presence pressing against me. Then he reached out. His fingers brushed mine as he took the sugar, and I swear the air in the room shifted. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. And then he said it. "You don't gotta lie, Jessica. I see it." My stomach tightened. "See what?" His eyes darkened. "The way you look at me." I should have denied it. I should have laughed it off, told him he was imagining things. But I didn't, because we both knew the truth. It happened fast. Too fast. 1 second, I was standing there, my heart pounding, and the next, Malik was closing the space between us. His body was warm, solid, his scent overwhelming. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his breath hot against my skin. I couldn't. I didn't. His lips crushed against mine, and every ounce of self-control I had left shattered. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me against him, and I melted, my body betraying me in ways I never imagined. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We didn't even make it out of the kitchen. It was desperate, urgent, a collision of need and recklessness. My back hit the counter, his hands on my hips, my fingers tangled in his short curls. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. And when it was over, when we were both breathless, tangled, lost in the aftermath, I knew. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Malik stayed for a while after, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my bare skin. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say. Eventually, he got up, grabbed his shirt, and turned to me. "You good?" I nodded, but I wasn't. I was shaking. I was on fire. I was alive. He smirked like he knew exactly what I was feeling, then leaned down, pressing one last kiss to my lips before heading for the door. I watched him leave, my heart still hammering, and the second he was gone, the guilt came crashing in. I stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. My lips were swollen, my skin flushed, my body still tingling from his touch. What the hell had I done? David's face flashed in my mind and my stomach twisted. He trusted me. He loved me. And I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. But as I stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash over me, another feeling crept in. one I wasn't ready to face. I wanted more. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more intense, dramatic tales. You won't want to miss what happens next. I told myself it was a one-time thing. A mistake. That's what I whispered to myself in the days after Malik and I crossed the line, repeating it like a prayer. But the truth? The truth was far worse. Because I didn't feel like I had made a mistake. I felt alive. The kind of alive I hadn't felt in years. My body still hummed with the memory of his touch. My skin still burned where his lips had been. And no matter how much I told myself to stop, I couldn't. I didn't want to. So when the next opportunity came, I didn't resist. And after that, it became routine. A dangerous, exhilarating, intoxicating routine. Malik and I didn't need words to understand what was happening between us. It started small. Glances through the window, a quick brush of hands when no one was looking, a text sent in the middle of the night. Then it turned into something more. We developed a system. David was predictable. Always at work by 7 a.m., home by 6 p.m. If he had a business trip, I knew at least a week in advance. That gave me time to plan, to make sure Malik and I could steal whatever moments we could. Some days, it was just 10 minutes in the laundry room, his hands slipping under my dress, my back pressed against the dryer as it hummed beneath me. Other times, it was hours in his bed, tangled in his sheets, the air thick with sweat and sin. And each time, it got harder to stop. Each time, I found myself craving him more. I was never a good liar before, but now I had mastered it. I told David I was going to the grocery store, but really, I was slipping into Malik's house. I told my best friend, Lisa, that I had started taking yoga classes when really, I was in Malik's bed. The lies came easy, smooth, rolling off my tongue like they had always been there. And for a while, no one suspected a thing. But then, the cracks started to show. Lisa was the first to notice. One afternoon, we were sitting at a cafe sipping iced lattes, when she gave me a look. "You seem different," she said, stirring her drink slowly. I forced a smile. "Different how?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "I don't know, lighter. Happier." My stomach twisted. "Isn't that a good thing?" She studied me for a second longer, then shrugged. "Yeah, I guess so. Just hope it's for the right reasons." I laughed it off, but my palms were sweating. Lisa had known me for years. If anyone could sense something was off, it was her. And then there was David. At first, he didn't notice anything. He was too buried in work, too focused on his next big project. But one night after dinner, he lingered. I was at the sink, washing dishes, when I felt his eyes on me. "You've been on your phone a lot lately," he said casually. My heart skipped. "Just talking to Lisa." "Yeah?" He leaned against the counter. "I don't think I've seen her around much." I forced a smile, keeping my back to him. "She's been busy." A long pause. Then, "You seem different." The same words Lisa had said. But this time, they sent a chill down my spine. I turned to face him, my hands still dripping with soap. "Different how?" David studied me, his expression unreadable. "I don't know. Just off." My throat tightened. I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, hoping to end the conversation. "You worry too much." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I knew I had to be more careful. But temptation had its claws in me, and I was too far gone to stop now. So I kept pushing. And one afternoon, I almost got caught. David had told me he had a late meeting, which meant I had hours of freedom. I wasted no time slipping over to Malik's, my pulse racing as I knocked on his door. He opened it with that lazy smirk, already pulling me inside before I could say a word. The moment was electric, wild, a blur of heat and hands and whispered names. I lost myself in him, in the way he took me, in the way he made me feel. I never heard the car pull into the driveway, never heard the front door open. But Malik did. "Shit!" he hissed, scrambling up, grabbing his clothes. I blinked, still breathless. "What?" Then I heard it. David's voice, calling my name. My stomach dropped. Malik yanked me up, pushing me toward the back door. "Go! Now!" I barely had time to grab my shirt before I was slipping out, heart hammering. I ran, barefoot, half-dressed, my mind racing. I made it into our house just as David walked in the front. My breath was ragged, my skin flushed. He frowned. "Were you outside?" I forced a shaky laugh. Yeah, I thought I heard something in the backyard. His eyes swept over me. My messy hair. My lack of shoes. My shirt, hastily thrown on. For a second I thought I was done. But then he just sighed. You scared me. I let out a breath, forcing a smile. Sorry. He kissed my forehead, lingering for just a second too long. And then he was gone, heading upstairs to shower. I stood frozen, my pulse pounding. That had been too close. And yet, as I stood there, the adrenaline still rushing through me, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. I didn't feel relief. I felt excited. I knew it would come crashing down eventually. I had been walking a tightrope, balancing between thrill and disaster, between passion and the life I had built with David. And for a while, I convinced myself I could keep it all together. But lies have a way of unraveling. And mine were about to come undone. It started with a text. A simple, careless mistake. Malik and I had been careful. Never calling, never texting during unsafe hours. But that morning, I woke up to a message that sent ice through my veins. Malik, can't stop thinking about you. Last night was crazy. My stomach dropped. David was in the shower, his phone charging on the nightstand next to mine. He always grabbed it first thing when he got out. Panic surged through me as I fumbled with my phone, fingers trembling as I deleted the message. My heart pounded in my ears, every second stretching into eternity. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to act normal, to slip back into the role of the devoted wife. But for the first time since this started, I felt something I hadn't before. Fear. Not just of being caught, but of losing everything. Over the next few days, I felt David watching me more. His questions became sharper, his eyes lingering on me longer than usual. At dinner, he studied me in a way that made my skin prickle. You've been different, he said one night, setting down his fork. I forced a smile, my hands tightening around my wine glass. We've had this conversation before, David. I know. But this time. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Jessica, if there's something going on, you need to tell me. My stomach flipped. I laughed, too forced, too high-pitched. David, come on. What are you even saying? His jaw clenched. I don't know. But I feel something's off. I reached across the table, taking his hand, playing my part like I always did. I love you. There's nothing to worry about. He searched my face, his fingers twitching against mine. Finally, he sighed. Okay. I thought I had smoothed things over. Thought I had dodged another bullet. But I didn't know David as well as I thought. Because he had already started digging. The end came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. David had been acting strange all morning, distant, tense. I thought maybe work was stressing him out. I had no idea he had found the truth. I was in the kitchen when he called my name. Jessica. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. I turned, wiping my hands on a dish towel, forcing a smile. Yeah? David stood in the doorway holding his phone. His face was unreadable. But his eyes were full of something dark. Something dangerous. Who's Malik? The words hit me like a slap. My mouth went dry. My vision blurred. I don't. He held up his phone. I saw the text. I couldn't breathe. I knew something was off, so I checked your phone when you were sleeping. And guess what? Deleted messages can still be recovered. His voice was eerily calm. Too calm. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. You lied to me, he said, stepping closer. For months. David. Was it worth it? His voice cracked. Was he worth it? Tears stung my eyes. I never meant to. Don't. His hands clenched into fists. Don't say you didn't mean to. You chose this, Jessica. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. Then he laughed. A cold, hollow sound. Wow. I can't believe this. I wiped at my face. I love you, David. He shook his head, stepping back like I had burned him. No, you don't. You love the lie you were living. I reached for him, but he pulled away. It's over, he said, his voice final. I'll be gone by tonight. And just like that, my world crumbled. David didn't scream. He didn't throw things. He didn't beg for an explanation. He simply left. By nightfall, his suitcase was packed, and he walked out the door without looking back. I sat in the empty house, staring at the walls, feeling nothing and everything all at once. I had lost him. I had ruined my marriage. For what? For a thrill? For a passion that burned too hot? Too fast? A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. My heart stuttered. I already knew who it was before I even opened it. Malik stood on my porch, hands in his pockets. His face was unreadable. I heard. I nodded, my throat tight. You okay? I let out a shaky breath. I don't know. He stepped closer, lifting a hand to my face, his touch warm. You don't have to be alone tonight. A long pause. And then, I did what I always did. I let him in. Sometimes, we make choices that change everything. And once the damage is done, there's no turning back. If you enjoyed this intense, dramatic story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories filled with passion, betrayal, and secrets that refuse to stay buried.